Hi everybody, my name is Logan Martin, and this month I'm going to be showing you my presentation on heterochromia. So, let's start out here by asking a basic question. What exactly will we be discussing during our presentation today? Heterochromia is a relatively rare condition, wherein one eye is a different color than the other. While it occurs in a rare portion of the population, it has had an interesting position in many pieces of various cultures as well as some parts of human history. Before we look at heterochromia on a cultural or historical level, let's look at it medically. A bit more complex than earlier explained, heterochromia is a medical condition wherein the iris is multicolored. This can occur in various varieties, but is most commonly known in full heterochromia, wherein one iris is an entirely different color than the other. Heterochromia can occur in both humans and animals, and in animals in particular is commonly associated with the lack of genetic diversity. In common household pets such as cats and dogs. It can actually, interestingly enough, occur in cattle as well. So let's look at the basic question of how exactly common heterochromia is. Why it has a tendency to be overrepresented in media, books, movies, etc., to make a point about a character. It is actually not particularly common. Heterochromia shows up in about 1% of the human population overall, and while associated with the previously mentioned lack of genetic diversity in animals, is not so much so in humans. In fact, heterochromia is actually commonly seen in certain specific breeds of animals more than it is in any particular variety of humans. So let's ask the question, at least for humans, how does heterochromia occur? While it's primarily genetic in animals, heterochromia isn't necessarily in humans. In infants in particular, heterochromia can be associated with various diseases such as Horner syndrome, but can also commonly develop congenitally with no other symptoms. Heterochromia can also be acquired later on in life via various forms of trauma, as well as can sometimes be associated with certain glaucoma treatments, as well as diabetes, which I think is absolutely fascinating, which both those can lead to developing various forms of heterochromia. Not necessarily the previously mentioned full. So I mentioned various other forms of heterochromia previously, but what forms are there? Heterochromia occurs in 3 to 4 various varieties: sectoral, central, and complete heterochromia. Sectoral heterochromia occurs in which the iris is split in some way, shape, or form between one color or another. This can be more than split. It can be fractionally divided into thirds, I believe, but most commonly you see it wherein one iris is partially one color and partially another. Central heterochromia is also a form of heterochromia wherein the iris is divided by color, but in this case, it's circular, so it's like a circle inside a circle where the outer layer is a different color than the inner layer. And then aforementioned is complete heterochromia, wherein one eye is just a completely different color than the other. It can also occur in various forms such as siderosis, where an iron deposits lead to an abnormally dark iris, which is also considered a form of heterochromia. Heterochromia in animals is fascinating because while associated with genetic diversity, that is not necessarily the case. Certain breeds, especially in cats, such as Turkish Vans or Angoras, as well as Japanese bobtails, and dogs, such as Australian Shepherds, Collies, and Welsh Corgis, have a higher chance for heterochromia than most other breeds. It's also been recorded in certain cattle, such as cows, and interestingly enough, sometimes in water buffalo. So let's look at heterochromia in history. While not necessarily the most important, factor in history, it has had an interesting place as a footnote for certain historical figures. For example, it was first mentioned by famous Greek philosopher Aristotle, but more interesting is its association with various historical figures, such as Byzantine Emperor Anastasius I, and actually being described, or Anastasius I, and also, interestingly enough, Alexander the Great, actually being described as a sign of Alexander the Great's otherworldly features and heroism in one of the original novels, or not novels, but publications about him, the Alexander Romance. Although, interestingly enough, this goes seemingly unmentioned in later publications on the history of Alexander. Another interesting cultural phenomenon is that of the odd-eyed cat, although that is also considered a type of cat seen with the various breeds that are more commonly seen with heterochromia, also has an interesting cultural association in the Arab world as well as Japan. Specifically in the Arab world, the odd-eyed cat is a minor cultural symbol in Turkey. And interesting enough, the Ankara Zoo in Turkey has a breeding program to preserve the Turkish Angora breed of odd-eyed cat. That we have it. That is a very short but interesting presentation on heterochromia for you all today. I thank you very much for watching my presentation, and I hope you all learned something and have a fantastic day.
Before we move on, you mentioned a glaucoma drug earlier.
Yes.
That causes the potential for heterochromia.
Mm-hmm.
Off the top of your head, and I don't expect you to know, do you know what that drug is?
Not currently.
Latanoprost.
That is latanoprost?
Which is a prostaglandin analog that we use virtually routinely as a first line of defense with our glaucoma patients.
If I remember, it's very rare to develop heterochromia via latanoprost, but it has been recorded previously.
That is 100% true.
I don't have the percentage off the top of my head, but I do think it's interesting.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Logan. This was very informative. And I think it's funny that cat reminds me of the one meme cat where it's like the woman screaming and pointing and there's the cat with the two colored eyes and the thing.
I didn't notice he had two colored eyes, but I think he does. I never noticed that.
All right. Thank you, everyone.